Tonight it is my privilege to be able to share with you. And over the last couple of weeks, whether it's been live here or whether it's been online, we've been working through a topic of Why Did You Do That series. And Sam spoke about it a few weeks back when we opened up this series, and he said to us, people need to say why do you forgive people, and why do you let things go, and why do you serve in the church, and all this sort of stuff. And we are continuing on with that theme tonight, and I've got one of my favourite topics it's the number one question when people say to me, why did you do that in my whole life that has happened, throughout being the pastor of this church. But before I go any further, I do want to say to all of our online church, hello and welcome. We do realise that there is a church audience here that's live, and we also know that there is a massive online church that watches us as well. I want to particularly say hi to my mum, who I know watches every single week. So hi, Mum, and I'm glad that you're watching again. And hey, a big mention of hello to Paul Gibson. I know that he's watching all the time. His wife is in here. So g'day. You're not forgotten just because you're not here in the building. So I just wanted to make mention of you. And listen, by the way, for all you guys that are watching online, if you ever are in the area of Port Macquarie and you're able, drop in and come to a live service. There is so much more happens in this service than what you just see online. There's food and there's fellowship and there's friends and barbecues and a whole bunch of stuff that happens. So make sure that if you are in the area, feel free to drop in. You don't just have to watch always online. You can drop in. And of course, if you haven't got the Coastside app, sounds like I'm doing the announcements, but I'm doing it for the guys online. Listen, download the Coastside app. You will get all of these messages, the one I'm preaching tonight, plus all of the other ones that we've done, right back for the last couple of years. There's a free Bible on the app. There is a bunch of stuff that will help you know what's happening in this church and all the stuff that you get with that. So if you want a Bible, download the app. It's yours for free. The app's free. The Bible's free. All the content's free. Get the app and make that happen, because all of us here have that, and I just think it's great that everybody knows what is available out there. Number one question that I get asked from people when just people that I work with, or people that I'm in clubs with, or shooting clubs with, or in business, or whatever I do, the question that people ask me, well, this is not the number one, but one of the top four is this: why do you run a church? And it's often it's not the question of, what the church is doing. They look at me, they've normally known me for a couple of months or weeks, or I've done some other dealings with these people outside of them being in this church or me being their pastor. And all of a sudden they find out that I'm a pastor and I run a church, and they say, why do you run a church? Now, I don't know what it means by why do you run a church, as if like, why would you do it, as in like you don't look like you could do it, or you don't look like you should do it, or you don't look like you should be doing it. I'm not sure where it comes from, but that is asked of me a lot. The second thing I get asked a lot is this: why do you help people that you don't even know? Because often I say, we know the church does this, that, blah, blah, blah. And they say, why would you do that? There is so much going on in the world. Why do you help people that sometimes you don't even know, or sometimes don't even thank you for it? Why do you still help people that are like that? That's the second question. Here's another question I get asked a lot, but it's this one. It's why do you, or how do you forgive people that have wronged you? I get asked that a lot. It is like, wow, you know what? You're supposed to forgive people, right? And I go, yeah. They go, how do you do that? How do you do that if your wife's done this, or your husband's done that, or your kids have done this and rejected you, or this has happened, or someone in business has ripped you off? Or how do you forgive people? And that is also a common question. But here is the number one question. And I'm building up to this, and it's this one here. Here's the biggest question that I get asked out of any group of people that get to know me, and we've worked through those other questions, is this. It's, you're not one of those guys that give all your money to the church, are you? That's what they ask me. You don't give all your money to the church. And you know what I say to them? No, of course I don't. But I do give some. And they've always goes back to some reason after all those other questions, it's if like the church is taking money off people, or they're made to give, or for some reason I'd get sacked if I didn't give, or something would happen. And they often ask me that. Now that question is followed by this. It's normally a list of things that the church has done wrong throughout the entire church history of whatever they know about. That usually takes a fairly long time to go through the list of all the things the church have done wrong. And the sad thing is that 99% of the things that they accuse the church of doing are right. And that's a sad thing. But I also say this to them. The church also does a lot of good. And even though there's a lot of things that the church has got wrong right through history, right back as far as you can go, and even though there's still churches that don't get everything right now, even today, this year, this decade, at this time season, they don't all get everything wrong, and a lot of them are doing a lot of good things for their community and for the people that attend their church and for their city and for the kingdom of God. And I always answer with that just to let them know that it's more than just, always all the bad stuff. So here, what I'll give you tonight, I want to give you the 3 main reasons of why I give to the church. Now, this is just a testimony, okay? So hang on to your wallets. The offering's been taken up. There's not going to be a second offering, okay, after I finish preaching. If you haven't given, you don't have to give, and you never had to give in the first place. Online, you're safe. No one's going to jump out and make you give. It's all good, okay? This is just answering the question of why I give to the church. And I've got 3 main reasons that I want to run through tonight, and then that's it. I'll let you go and we'll get on with what the rest of the service has got for us. But here is number 1. The number 1 reason in my list of why I give to the church is because it helps people with less, or with people who are struggling more than I am. Do you know, I personally, and that means that means that has happened with this church, but not always the same people, that I have personally been to the Philippines over 10 times, okay, in my life. That is like, after the last 24 years of running the church, that's like nearly every second year I have been in the Philippines on average. When we have been over there, we have done everything from build water purification plants for cities that did not have anything else to drink but stuff they brought in bottles from creeks and stuff, or sewage water. And we put a water plant in there that drilled down far deeper than it was ever supposed to go, which cost far more than it was ever supposed to cost. But at the end of the day, it pumped up water from underground, and it went through a whole system that purified the water, which was as clean as any drinking water that you would drink in this nation. We did that, and churches do things like that. We have done medical clinics over there. We have given out rice to people that don't have anything to eat. We have sponsored kids so they can go to school. This is just in the Philippines. Then we've got, in Port Macquarie, we've got school packs that we've given out to kids that are starting school where, for whatever reason, they don't have what every other student has right here in Australia. We have given out fridges and freezers and beds and bedding and computers and books and school shoes. We've put people in motels. We've paid for funerals. We've paid for weddings. We've paid for people that find themselves in a tight spot and just don't know how to get out of it. And when you see the other side of what a church actually does, and when lists like that are read up, and that's just from what this church, a few highlights of what this church has been doing over the last couple of decades, that's why I choose to be a part of that. I want to be a part of that. I want to say, you know what, some of my money and even some of my time went to making those things happen, and they did. That's the number 1 reason, or that's the first reason why I give to the church. The second reason is this, is why I give to the church. It's because this is a place where people can find God and start a relationship with Him. Do you know that every single week, I should retract that, except for when COVID's on. Every single week, apart from when COVID's on, this church preaches a message of hope for people to realize that whatever they are walking through in life, that it's only temporal, and not only is there a God here to help them get through that, and there are people within the church to help them get through that, but it has an eternal value. That once you live this life, once you leave this life, once your days or your number is up in this life, there is a whole of eternity where every single human being on the planet is going to spend either with God or without God. And the second, even more most important reason is that we need to keep the doors of churches worldwide open. Now, I know you can talk about the 99 things that they've got wrong over all the history, and I see how people justify that. I really do. But it's not all we do. And we don't always get it wrong. And not everyone gets it wrong. But I want to tell you something. There are good churches out there, and they are doing things, and those doors need to stay open so people realize that they can have a personal relationship with God, and they can realize that for anything where they have done something wrong or screwed up their life or felt bad about something, that there is a God that will forgive them for every single thing they've done wrong. And they also find a place where they've done things wrong and they've screwed up other people's lives, that they can find forgiveness for themselves and for those that they've hurt, not just what they've done against God, but what they've done against others. They can be forgiven, but they can also forgive. And for that reason alone, the doors of a church must stay open. And that is the second thing on my list of why, I give to the church, because I believe in all of those things. The third reason why I give to the church, and this is my last one, and I don't want to draw it out, but I want you to know that there are principles attached to giving to the church. It's not just like the money's given and then it's gone and you sort of budget it in and that was the end of it. And it was like you went to Harvey Norman and you exchanged some money for a PlayStation, or you exchanged some money for a television, or you exchanged some money at McDonald's for a Big Mac. It's not just an exchange for something. There is an eternal, a supernatural, eternal consequence and principles and blessing that is attached to to giving and a generosity that only God can put on your finances. It's not just a simple exchange. It comes down onto your finances. And I'm talking about, reaping and sowing. You reap what you sow. Most people have heard about that. You might have heard it this way: you get what you give. You might call it karma. You could call it a whole bunch of other things, but it's the same principle, just rebranded or sung in a different way in another song, or rebranded by another religion. It all means the same thing: is what you sow, that you will reap, and it will come back to you. And as you give out, and that includes finance, it also comes back in. And that principle of reaping and sowing, I've mentioned two pretty good reasons already, but that one by itself is a big one. You know why? Because I got to live. I want my finance blessed. I'm not telling you what to do. You do whatever you want. I'm just telling you why I give to the church. But I want God's hand on my finance. I want to know that if I make a business decision, or I make a transaction, or I buy something, or whatever, I want to know that God's hand is on it. I don't want to just do it by myself. I'd get half of it wrong. I want to know that supernatural reaping and sowing principle is on there, and that is what I want God to do on my finance. And I learnt that at a very young age, and I'm still preaching it 40 years later, that this is what needs to happen. You know what Jesus said in Luke chapter 6? He said this. He said, this is just Jesus speaking. He said, give, and it will be given to you. That's the reaping and sowing part. But then he goes on to say, a good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So let me just start here with in reaping and say, let me start with sowing. This is the supernatural God part of this blessing that comes with it. When something is sown, it's this, the word sowing is a farming term. Most of you would know that. But if you sow one little grain of wheat, you can just one little grain of wheat that can go in the ground, and then somehow, only God knows, with the water and the wind and the rain and nature and all that God has provided for it, that one piece of grain can grow up and have a whole head of grain on it. So it's just not the one grain that you sowed. Now all of a sudden it's the whole head of grain that you've now got back because you sowed something into it. It's not just even Stephen. You know, if you get an apple, and you get an apple and you get it, open it up and you take an apple seed out of it and you sow those seeds in the ground. It is not just the one seed that goes in there, but when it goes in there and then the tree starts to grow, it's only a matter of time. This is where most people go wrong. They don't want to wait. It's like, I put a seed in the offering on Sunday and where's my apple tree? It's what is it, 9 o'clock? I gave it 7 and 9, there's still nothing here. Or next week or this year. Listen, God is the one that makes it grow. And that one apple seed can grow into an apple tree that has many apples on it, has lots of other seeds in it. And that's how the principle of sowing and reaping actually works when God's hand is onto it. Potentially, it's like a really good investment. You put something into the church, and there's good reasons for that. We've already talked about a couple of them. But just for yourself or for myself, it's just smart. It's just investing. It's like I'm giving to all these great things, and I know that as I sow, so shall I reap with a good measure, shaken down, pressed together, and God is always going to bless me far more than what I've ever given him. And I have done that for 40 years, and trust me, it works. Now let me just go back to Luke 6 for a minute. In 37 it says this, and I want to prove this point to you. It says this, Jesus speaking, Luke 6, 37, the verse before I just spoke about. It says, do not judge and you won't be judged. That is a fair and even swap. I don't judge you, then I expect out of reaping and sowing, you won't judge me. We both didn't judge each other. That's fair. That's the end of the story, the end of the verse. That's what it says. Then it says, do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. So if you're not walking around pointing the finger at others and condemning them and everything else, then the Bible says then you will get the same thing back. People won't walk around, point the finger at you and condemn you. Even Stephen, clean swap. You do it to them, they'll do it to you. You don't do it to them, they won't do it to you. It's very fair. It goes on to the next verse and says this, or the next part of that verse, it says, forgive and you'll be forgiven. Just a complete even swap. If I forgive Cherie, then Cherie will forgive me. There's nothing more to it. I sowed forgiveness, I reaped forgiveness. It's even, it's a fair swap. That's the end of that verse. But then it goes to give and it will be given to you. But the verse doesn't stop there. All the others stopped with the, you do this, you get that. You do this, you get that. You do this, you get that. But when it comes to giving, it's written there in verse 38, it says give and it will be given to you. It doesn't go on to any other topic. It goes on to say a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. Not even Stephen. Not will I give $1, I get $1 back. I gave $50 in the offering, so I expect that God's going to somehow magically give me $50 back. That's not what it says. It says it's a good measure. Now, can I have the guys bring up this table for me? Bring this just, if I can have a little bit of help here for just a moment. I'm going to move this just over here for a second. Because I really want you to understand this. Because to me, it just made a lot of sense. And what about a hand for our guys and girls that are bringing this up here? Thank you very much for that. That's just amazing. But see, here's the thing that I wanted to show you. I bought my little bag of tricks here. There's a little cup here, and that's good. And there's another little jug here. That's nice. And it just so happens there was a watering can on the stage with water in it. And, we can put a little bit of water in here. And that seems, that's a lot of water. That's pretty good. We can put it, we'll just leave that there. We'll just chat for a minute. This is what happens, right? This is your giving. And you may decide to give, 50 mil, say 100 mil. Let's say, you're pretty generous, it's right up on the top there. So that is your giving, and that's what you decide to give to the church. But it's not even Stephen. Because in the reaping and sowing world of what the Bible explains to us, if you give that amount of money to the church for all the things we've mentioned before, and then it's put into God's hand, God comes back and he gets it, and he comes in and he goes, you know what? I'm going to give you more than what you gave me. So you get all of that back, and he fills it right up to the brim. That's what it says, right? Look at all that extra right up there. And you got more. And you think, wow, that's a good investment. But the Bible says more. It says not is it going to go to the brim. He said he's going to fill, I don't want to do too much, but he's going to fill it up, and he's just going to say, you know what, doesn't matter what happens, it's just amazing. Like, thank you so much, and you're helping my kid. And all of a sudden it's, whoa, this is really happening. Like, that's awesome. Well, you've got to be careful, because if you get too much money, people start seeing it spill out, and then people get jealous. So just sort of hold it a bit steady. But that's the principle. But wait, there's more. And it's not steak knives. Because he says this, not only does he say that it's going to be filled up and then overflowing, but he says this, and this is the bit that most people don't get. And this is why I got the demonstration here. He says that not only will it be pressed down, shaken together, and running over and pouring out onto your lap, but then he says, and this is the best bit ever, I love this bit. He says, for the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So some people are pretty generous with their cup, and it's filled up and it's amazing. But you know what? It's up to you how big your cup is. He doesn't tell you how big the cup has to be. He just says whatever cup size you decide to give, well, he's going to fill that up and overflow it. So I worked out at a really young age, what if I had a bigger cup? So then I give more to the church. Not what you have to do, just what I do. I gave more to the church. And then God come along and he said, you know what? Look at Mark's cup. We'll get that baby filled up. And we'll fill it up there. And, sometimes he gets distracted and he just looks away and, oh, crow. Sorry, God, it's all good. But I appreciate what you're doing. And then I'm trying to get rid of this thing because I don't want people to see too much of it. And it's how it works. And when you get to decide the size of your cup, it's not God withholding on you. It's the size of the cup you're choosing to use that withholds on you. Now, some people just don't get it. They go, the church has done 99 things wrong. And, this is what it's like, Well, I can't really trust the church. Can't really trust Mark. Can't really trust any church, really. You see the last one on the news? It's not really worth it. So you know what? I'm just going to take my cup home and hope that somehow it works out by myself. And all of a sudden, you've missed out on what God wants for you. And that is some of the logic behind why I give. But let me read you something else, because I want to share something else. The second principle I want to throw out to you tonight is this. It comes from Deuteronomy 8. And I love this one because it really starts to answer all of the questions. And it says this in Deuteronomy 8:17, relevant for Old Testament, New Testament, still relevant for today. But it says this in verse 17. You may say to yourself, my power and the strengths of my hand have produced wealth for me. How many times have you heard that? You say, I don't know about this. This is a bit sort of, you've got to sort of trust God for that, and it's sort of just Bible talk, and it's sort of what pastors do. But you know what? I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay, because my power and the strength of my hands and the strength of my arms and the fact I went to university and the fact I become a policeman or a doctor or a butcher or a baker or a candlestick maker. You did all the study and now you've got a pretty good job. And now it's really going well for you. And you're happy with that. So therefore, none of this matters to you because you have done the right thing. And let me say this to you. The Bible does say, if you don't work, you don't eat. So God's not just wanting everyone to just magically make sure that they give some to the church and then don't bother getting a job or don't bother studying or don't bother going to work. That's not how it works. There's a balance in it. But the balance is don't just go to work and forget about how you're going to allow God to get on your finances. Because this is the next verse that says this. But remember, you may say to yourself, my power and strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant which He swore to your ancestors as it is today. God, and this is why I give, as well as the other cool reasons that I told you about. God promises that He gives us the ability to create wealth. So it's not just about working hard and getting a bit, and it's not just about reaping and sowing, but when God's involved in your financial world, He gives you the ability, which means He's not going to do it for you, but He gives you the ability to create wealth, and not just this wealth and this blessing, but create even more wealth on top of that. And when God starts to give us the ability to create and to come up with ideas and deals and investments and jobs and careers and a whole bunch of stuff like that, all of a sudden we go into a whole nother world. Let me read my story out to you just for the sake of time, and then I'm done. Because remember, this is just why I give to the church. I was taught these principles at a very young age, and I have given to the church from my first job, from when I left school. Before I married Cherie and I bought our first house. We rented it out, so the tenants started paying it off. We got married, we moved in, we renovated, we sold, and we bought a much bigger house. This one had a double garage and an ensuite. Good thing when you got kids coming. We had a good income, a good business, and everything was going great. But then Cherie and I felt to work in the church as youth pastors. And we gave our lives to serving God and the church. Problem was, that didn't pay as well. We lost everything we had and had a season where we had to rent a house and go on government benefits. I was pastoring here at that time. That taught us, it wasn't a bad thing. It taught us how to budget. It taught us how to save. And we got all our stuff together and put a deposit on another house. And we still gave to the church every single week, even when we're on government benefits, and budgeted and saved. We finally were able to move back into our own home, but the house was in the worst neighbourhood of Port Macquarie. But we felt good that we could do it up, and one day things would happen, and we felt that it was God's plan and everything was going to be all right. That bad neighbourhood turned into one of the best neighbourhoods in Port Macquarie, with a shopping centre next door, Bunnings across the road, the best private school in the street, and Charles Sturt University basically touching my boundary. God always honours His principles, and God is always faithful to those that continually follow, serve, and are generous towards Him and His church. God has continually blessed Cherie and I in both land developments, businesses, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm not talking survive, I'm talking blessed abundantly. Through God's blessing on our lives, we bought the Gateway site at Port Macquarie. Most of you know that, opposite McDonald's. Subdivided it, and we sold the back half. And my next gift to this church is a $2 million gift that I am now sowing into the kingdom of God. Why do I tell you how it went from $10 out of my first paycheck to a $2 million block of land just by being faithful with God? You might say, well, why do you tell us that? What are you getting at? There's 3 things that I want out of this next gift that I'm about to give. And let me tell you what they are. The first thing that I want, you say, what do you want? I'm just telling you what I want because it just goes to the preach. I want a place and a church to be established where the gospel can be preached to both this generation and the next. That's the first thing I want. The second thing I want is I want people to hear and know that God is amazing and He never lets you down no matter what you work through, and financial principles actually work. And the third thing I want is this. A bigger bucket. Because that's how she rolls. I started here and I've got to here. I understand the principles, and now there's a church established in this district for both this gen and the next. People get saved and I get a bigger bucket. And I can't wait for the next couple of years as she just keeps coming out, and little Dallas wants a bit of a splash, and it's all happening. You can all have a bit. There's plenty around, because all I've really done, besides how wonderful is Mark helping this church go forward, is I just put myself in line for a bigger bucket. And you know what? That's how it works. So if you want to know why I give to the church, there it is. That's why I do it. The problem is, I've got to finish on this. The band can come up. And as the band comes, because it's getting close to 6, I don't know how to get all this back in here, because I've got to show you this little trick. And this is sort of going to go in here. Most of it will sort of go in there. Anyway, we're under time restraints there. But see, some people, their buckets look like this. They're flatline givers. And they get to a certain point in their life and they go, you know what? I want to give a bit more. And they go like this. They just pop out that much. And now you're a sort of a better Christian, feeling better about yourself. But you've got to realise that you get to choose how big the bucket is. And some of us that have been around a long time, we go, this is working. And then we pop it out one more. And that's sort of how, the way this bucket's growing is the way that some of us grow with our giving and our generosity towards the church. Me, I'm all in. I just want to upgrade to another bucket. Let me finish with this. If you're in the church and you love God and you're a Christian, whether you're online or here in the church, can I encourage you? God's principles work. They really, really do. And if you're online watching, or you're here in the church watching, and you're not a Christian, or you're not following God, or you don't believe in it, then that's okay. But don't ever ask me again why I give to the church, because I think it's pretty well self-explanatory, and this has worked for me for the last 52 years, and it will work for the next 52 years for both me and you. God bless you. Let's go into worship.